Welcome. Today we're going to take a look at introducing you to Adobe Lightroom Classic. The reason why we use Adobe Lightroom Classic is because it has a better layout, more convenient layout for beginner users, and the tools that we'll see on the program itself is a little bit more user friendly. Once you do open up Adobe Lightroom, we are going to take a look at the layout, the foundation. Over on the left side navigation, we have our presets. These presets will be beneficial if you're especially getting into the first time of editing photos, in which I can go through different categories, whether it's landscapes, portraits, being able to enhance an image or make adjustments that are already created for you. In the middle is our central point where our photos will be, and then over on the right side is where we develop the image, enhance the colors, modify any of the exposure, or many other features as well. But this is just a beginning intro to Adobe Lightroom. And we're going to begin by opening up the images I provided for you. To do this, we're going to go up to File and down to Import and Photos and Videos. I already have a preset number of images, but I can go over to my drive. I'll go into my downloads and my specific folder. And today we're going to be taking a look at 6 different images. Right now, I currently have all the images selected inside this folder. You may be in your downloads folder trying to figure out what images you need. But we are going to unselect the all photos on the top left, as we see a display of showing all the images inside. If I were to go over to my downloads, we would see this same idea, where we have all our photos here. The preset is usually having all the photos selected. So we first want to deselect. And for these 6 photos, I'm going to select out the Grand Canyon image, the trees in the canyon, this old raggedy wagon, the cow cannon trading post, our beach image, and finally we're going to take a look today at our little beach fence. So with all these selected, once I'm satisfied with it, I go down to Import on the bottom right. I see that they are displaying the 6 images along the main section, but this doesn't allow us to get into developing. To develop, we can go over to Develop at the top navigation on the right side. And when I click on Develop, it brings up our first image. Along the bottom left side, we can see that we have all our 6 different images if I want to click through. So it's very easy to sort and focus on the one that you want to adjust. The first image that we're going to take a look at is the Grand Canyon image. With the Grand Canyon image, unfortunately, it was a very cloudy morning when taking this photo, but we can still get a good sense of how big and wide the Grand Canyon was. If I want to take a look at the left side navigation, there are a number of presets. If you do not see presets, we can take a look. We have a little thumbnail sample in our navigator showing us the display of the image. Down on the left side, we have presets. With the presets, understand that we would have to go into a category to allow us to get a sense of what we can possibly apply onto our image. So if I were to go down to subject or adaptive, we can see adaptive landscape, where I have down towards the bottom subject landscape, likely because this is a landscape that is something that you'd want to concentrate on. So just to begin, I'm going to click on the drop down for adaptive landscape. And I'm just going to highlight or move my cursor over top to see how it affects the image. You don't want to click on any of the examples just yet. If you click on it, it will apply certain features or certain techniques on it. But with these presets, you have the choice of kind of shuffling through, seeing how it's going to affect your image. I can try the subject landscape down the bottom. And this actually might bring out your color a little bit more, a little bit differently. You can see they have all their own little presets that are going to modify out the colors, the tones of the image, maybe some details. But it's up to you to kind of decide what works best for you. Looking through these images, I do probably like this LN10 over on the bottom left. This is located again in the subject landscape. If I were to click on this, you can see that before I do click on it, we have more of a muted tones over top of our mountains. But when we click on L10, you get a little bit more brighter, more vivid visual of the landscape. So when I do click on this, you're going to notice that it changes the presets or all the different settings over on the right side. It's modifying all these little presets for you, adjusting your texture, your clarity, your exposure, but we can still make adapted changes to the settings that they provided for us. If I did want to see the actual original version versus the new version, I could simply hit Y on my keyboard, and it allows me to see the original versus the now new. Again, Y, if you hit on your keyboard, brings up the old. You can see the before and the after over on the right side. So just if I do want to get a sense of where this is, I go up to view at the top navigation. I can see before and after. I could change the layout. If I wanted to change the layout, I can see top and bottom. But for myself, I usually prefer working with the left and right if I want to see that view change. You could see the before only, you could do the split screen, but for today we're going to keep it all with the standard left and right. And again, if you do just want to focus on the new version that you're creating, just hit Y again and it resets to the now edited version that we have. But with this version, I can at least see the difference between what I've started with and now what I'm enhancing the look to do. Overall, I like the colors or modification, how much it brightened up the mountains inside of the canyon, but I still want to look to enhance these colors a little bit more. So if I do want to concentrate on this a little bit more, I can undo with Y, but I can look to test out modifying out our main segments. Over on the right side, if I highlight over top, we'll say the edit, we have crop, we have the remove tool, we'll take a look at that later on. We have red eye, that doesn't apply here. We have masking, and no AI edits because we don't currently have any edits for AI. But again, when it comes into this, we want to look to see how we can modify out the tones, or the temperature if we're not satisfied with it. But it's just a patient process that you have to take your time with to figure out what works best to enhance the overall look and feel. For the exposure, one of the main features of adjusting an image, if I wanted to get it brighter, we can see that we can pull this left to right to help enhance the overall image. I'm going to keep it moderately where it was for the presets, but the contrast, we can look to bring out the colors a little bit better. We still want to make sure that it does look realistic, so don't overdo certain settings. This takes away all the shadows that are in the canyon. But I would want to take my time just going through to see how it's going to help enhance the color. Be careful if I'm adjusting the highlights. I don't want to take away the details of the clouds. Right, as you can see that it's affecting all the landscape as I adjust the shadows. We can get very dark with it. Again, affecting the whites, this is really finding the white area of the image overall. Or the blacks, I do want to make sure that there still is black appearing in the shadowed areas of the subject. One main feature, especially when you're dealing with mountains or landscape, is looking at your textures and clarity. With your texture, you can bring out more texture to bring out the real grit and grain of the landscape itself. But be careful not to go too high with it. We still want to look at realistic. And we're not looking to make it look painterly, so I do want to still have texture to the overall look and feel. Take a look at clarity. If I do want to pull up the clarity a little bit more, again, you don't want to overdo it. This creates more of an HD effect, HDR effect. It doesn't look realistic. It's all about finding a happy medium that still keeps to the original photo, but helps enhance the overall look and feel. We have our vibrant section. If I wanted to pull out some colors, maybe bring in some purples from the blue sky sitting over top of the mountainscape, you can see how we can enhance it. Or if I wanted to pull down the color, go more of a black and white, we can pull it to the opposite direction. And this is just where you have to be careful, because if I'm looking at this tree, I don't want to necessarily say this looks realistic. So it might be just bringing down the saturation a little bit to bring in a more realistic overtone. If I did want to focus on certain features, again, I can hit Y to kind of see the difference between the two. Definitely a lot better in the color overall. We get better separation happening, be able to see the canyon versus what's going on with the rest of the landscape. There are several different categories, and I don't want to overwhelm you trying to go through every single one. If we notice we have the tone curve, I would avoid using any of the tone curve. Understand that they usually list this in order of how you want to edit your photo. I would always start from the basic settings, look to adjust these settings before you ever get into the more advanced settings that we have. But we can also feature on specific elements. If I wanted to concentrate on maybe enhancing out the sky itself, I could go over to our what is known as the masking. I'm going to click on the masking, and I'm going to click on the sky section. With the sky section, Lightroom does a great job recognizing the overall subject. And with this, I can look to enhance just elements of the sky itself. So if I wanted to push the exposure, we could drop it down or push it up. I can try the contrast, see if I get a little bit darker on the tones. Or we can adjust certain features to really bring it out or get a separation between the highlights and shadows of the clouds. Again, this is a very cloudy morning. We're lucky to see any type of light peeking through the clouds. Unfortunately, it's all about timing when it comes into taking photos. You get lucky, and sometimes you don't have much luck. But it does have this very purple kind of tone that's now hitting the background mountains. I can see if I want to overdo it, I want to be careful. I still want to remember to have the orange and the yellow coming out from the sun where it's peeking out in the morning. But again, if I were to hit Y, I can kind of see the difference between the two, how it changes the image, might create a little bit of contrast overall with the view. One aspect, if I did want to concentrate on modifying a certain feature, let's say if I wanted to enhance this close-up mountain, I go back over to my masking, and I'm going to create a new mask. Creating this new mask, I'm going to focus on just this specific landscape here. If I want to do that, I'm going to use the brush tool. And with the brush tool, I can paint over the area that I want to modify. You can see we're just going to concentrate on the foreground mountain here. If you wanted to shrink down the size of your brush, you can always hit the left bracket, make your brush smaller, or right bracket to increase the size of your brush. But you can see that once I paint over top of this area, shows red to understand what area that we wanted to focus on. If I hold down Alt or Option, I can always paint or undo a certain section that I did paint over before. But again, once I now have this area selected, I go over to my settings. Maybe I want to enhance the texture on this. You can see that is about, if I pull this up, I can get a little bit more texture. See, if I pull it all the way down to the left, it becomes more blurred out. But if I pull it slightly to the right, it will slightly adjust the overall clarity or the texture itself. Or if I want to take clarity, you want to be careful not to overexpose it. It doesn't look like it's part of the image now. But if I wanted to try saturating out the color a little bit more, pulling up on the saturation or adjusting on the hue, be careful not to, again, make it look unrealistic. And I can always hit Control or Command Z to undo. But again, if I want to see the before and after, you can see that now we have a little bit more saturation overall in the image. Just brings out the mountains a little bit better while not making it so muted as it looks from the original. So if I am satisfied with such a work, I can look to now export this. And we're going to do this just one at a time. So when it comes into exporting, if I want to export this image, I'm going to right click on the image. I'm going to go down to export and export in the secondary option. With export settings, the first time you export is going to be the most confusing part, but breaking it down, we have the export location. I want to choose where I want to save it to, so I can either create a specific folder or save it to a specific folder. But for myself, or if you want to save it, I can save it to the original folder that you started from, or I can choose a folder or choose a different location. For myself, I'm just going to look to select out a new folder. I can choose and then identify where I want to look to save it. So for myself, I want to say photo edits, and I can hit create. And I know it's going to be going into this testing folder that I've already created. So I can choose here. You do not need to create out a subfolder. Right now, the default usually has the put in subfolder. I can just uncheck that so it doesn't do that. When it comes into naming this, when we originally named this, it had a generic number letter name, but I can look to rename it. Just choose on rename, choose custom name, and I can rename it to what I want. So if I want to say photo edit, I'll probably put a 1 edit just so I can identify the separation between this and the next picture. When we get into other settings, we don't need video. The file setting, we want to make sure it's on JPEG. Quality, we're going to put up to 100. The next section below, we have content credentials we do not need. For the resizing of the image, we are going to change the size of the image. For submission of this assignment, we're going to change this to 150 for our resolution. Changing 150 is going to cut down the size that it originally was, but still maintain good quality overall. So image sizing, just 150 for the resolution. Skipping the output sharpening, the metadata can stay as is. The one area that we are going to concentrate on is creating a watermark. For the watermark, you can make a custom watermark specifically to your name. That way we can separate your work from others. But we're going to click on the drop down where it says right now currently Pierce Test. I'm going to change to edit watermarks. And it shows us an example of what this watermark will look like. In the current placement, I scroll to the top, but right now I can see that it has my first initial, last name. You're going to put in your first initial, last name. And as you type in the sample down the bottom left, we can see the sample apply over to the image as a sample here. If you don't like the location that it has it for, you can change the anchor. The anchor can move to the center middle, left middle. I would highly recommend just keep it on the bottom left or bottom right. And if you don't like if it's bumping up against the edge of the paper, just adjust your inset. Inset, I can slide it a little bit to the left or right, but making sure that we can see your entire name. If I want to move it up or down, you can see that we can adjust that as well. But once I have that placed, I can hit save. And because this is the first time we're saving it with our name, just say name, placement. I can hit create, so I know exactly where it's going to be for all my images. Once I have a watermark, we don't have to worry about our post-processing. We're going to hit export. And when we save, if I go into my specific folder, you can see f.last name is placed down on the bottom of the image. So all your images, when you do export, will have your first initial, last name on the bottom of your images. It's a good way to keep organized or to make sure that you are labeling your work, helping to separate from other people's work. Once I've taken a look at that image, we're going to now take a look at our little canyon shot with the trees coming out. This is shooting from like a worm's eye view. If I wanted to get into rotating the image, we can take a look along the top navigation next to where we have our basic edits. We can go over to our cropping. With the crop, we can change the angle or perspective. So if I wanted to adjust this left or right, you can see that we could adjust the setting itself. I'm going to put this back into 0. But with the crop, we could get into cropping the entire image. Or if you want to rotate the image, hit the wrong button, excuse me. But if I wanted to get into rotating the image, I go up to photo at the top navigation. You have rotate left. You see how it modifies it. Or the shortcut key, it's the command or control and then right bracket or left bracket. So if I wanted to adjust this, command or control, right bracket, I can rotate this around until I'm satisfied with the placement of the angle. Again, command or control, left bracket will rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise, or right bracket rotates it 90 degrees clockwise. So with this image, we can take a look at, I want to help enhance this image overall. I don't mind the blue, the sky, but a big part is getting the details of the rocks as it goes up towards the sky. Right now, there's too much shadow happening that I can't really see the details. But over in the editing section, they actually have a couple options that we can take a look at for auto adjustments. The computer recognizes the photo, how it might enhance or how it might best modify the overall coloring or shadows of the picture. If I take a look right underneath basic, we have auto, black and white, and HDR. HDR is high definition, and it's overdoes the color in my mind, but it may be a preference for you as you get in more comfortable with the program itself. But if I wanted to click on auto, I can see how it helps enhance the image. Once I click on it, you can really see the definition of the rocks overall, but still maintains a realistic lighting to the subject area. If I did want to modify any of the settings, I could still look to adjust my categories from exposure to contrast, or push the blacks of the shadows, or experiment with the texture if I wanted to bring out more texture. But again, if I'm looking at Y, seeing the difference the before and after, you can see how much better the overall texture going on with the rocks looks when we help enhance the overall quality of the images. The shadows are still there, but we're still picking up all the little finite details. So once I'm satisfied with that, I don't have to go crazy with editing every single picture, but it's to maintain something realistic, something that works better for you being satisfied as a photographer. If I did want to look at any type of adjustments, maybe it's modifying out my sky. You can see it does a good job of selecting out the sky, but understand it's not perfect. It doesn't have all the tones. But if I wanted to help enhance the color out, make it more saturated with the blue, we could look to push the tones a little bit more. Again, if I were to hit Y, I can see the difference before and after. So that more pop of blue helps to really contrast the orange that's happening in the image overall. But you want to make sure to keep it realistic. Don't overdo it or try pushing it up too crazy. But once I am satisfied with it, again, we can look to export the image, or we can do an export of all the images once we're all done. So if I decided I wanted to keep what is here, I can right click on the image, export. All the other settings are correct, except I am going to change the name of the file to photo edit 2 so I can easily find it. I still have the name placement, so when I export, I go check out that file. It's located in the same folder that I created for my other edits. So I can easily jump back to see the contrast or to see the changes and modifications I made. But overall, I like the vibrance of the orange. Still looks realistic to what I shot without modifying it too much. Next image we're going to take a look at is this kind of broken down wagon. This is over by the Cal Canyon trading post. Highly recommend taking a drive out there. But a couple of little features that I do want to take a look at. If I wanted to get into other presets, again, we can take a look at our auto settings, but I also may want to kind of explore what else can be done. So if I ever want to undo something, I can hit Command or Control Z. And maybe I want to do this in black and white. So there's actually black and white presets over on the left side. With presets, I can highlight over top to see how it affects the image. Be careful with what you choose. You still want to maintain details. And the coloring ultimately is going to be ending up to what you think looks best. You don't have to end up with the same details I have. For myself, I do like this BW punch. Brings out a lot of the grain of the wood, but the grain of the wood might be a little bit too strong. So if I click on this, it sets those settings, and we can see that those settings are already set here. But one section that I may want to consider is dropping down the clarity, so I'm not getting as much detail. Other consideration is if I wanted to frame this a little bit better. Right now I feel like it could use a vignette to kind of draw a little bit more attention into the middle of the image. To draw a vignette, I would go down to my lens correction category. If I take a look over on the right side navigation, below basic, we have tone curve, BW. If I want to take a look at BW, you can see if I adjust on the tones, it's not really going to affect anything on the black and white, but it is affecting the tones if I start to manipulate out certain sections. So you want to be careful not to manipulate it without having understanding it's going to affect the tones of those colors. But again, the category that will create out a vignette for me is lens corrections. With lens corrections, you'll get the profile settings, but I'm going to switch over to manual settings. With manual, I can adjust my vignette. I can go white to the right or go down to the left and bring out a black shadow. And again, without this vignette, still works as an overall black and white image, but if I pull this vignette down to the left, it just gives us this darker shadow on the corners, helping us draw better attention to the middle. So for right now, let's go to -90. And that's all I need to do with my lens correction. The one aspect that I do want to take a look at, I noticed that there is a little flare, this little shape coming over top of the wood. It doesn't look realistic and it kind of takes away from the rest of the picture. So if I wanted to modify and fix this, I'm going to go to the remove tool. Next to the crop tool, we have the remove. With the remove, I'm going to make this brush size a little bit bigger, just over top of the image I want to get rid of. I'm just going to click on that area. With this clicked on, I'm going to go to selected and hit remove. And this is where AI comes in to help assist you without taking away from the realism of what you're trying to do. It does a quick sample and replacement, just bringing in the rest of the grain over top. And they actually give you 3 different options. So I can look at the 3 variations, just press to the right. Not much changes on the 3 images, but that's all I'm looking for. It's just a quick change to bring back the grain without having that flare change or modify the image in the wrong way. So once I'm satisfied with remove, I just click out of it. You can see that the image now looks completely realistic. It maintains without having that highlight over top. Once I'm satisfied with the edits, with the vignette from the lens correction, with the black and white tone that I picked out, and just modifying, getting rid of that little flare, I can right click, export, export again, and again this time I'm just going to call it Photo Edit 3. I click export, and just taking a look inside that folder, I have my original Grand Canyon picture to the canyon with the more vibrant color to now black and white. Again, we're seeing the F last name down on the bottom right side of my image. The next image we're going to take a look at is our fence along the beach. Again, we have a number of presets that we can take a look at. It kind of depends on what you're looking to create. If I wanted to go for more of a retro feel to the image, I can kind of scroll around, see how it's going to affect. Maybe gives this more dated 70s look, or it's going to modify the colors to something that might be an alternative for you. I click on edgy. This is in the portrait section, so you're not going to get really modification to the setting. But again, more to adaptive spring. We can see how the colors are going to affect. You can change it to autumn colors, which you're not really going to see much difference in these pictures themselves. For myself, I'm going to take a look at the basic auto adjustment. You can see that it darkens up the image overall. And again, I can always hit Y to see the difference between the two. Coloring definitely looks better. It's darker. This looks more muted over on the left side, where this has a lot better contrast. Again, if I do want to push it up further, I can look to enhance it a little bit more. This has a very shallow depth of field. You can see in the foreground, we get the little details of the fence. or the grain on the wood, but as we get to the further back, we get that blur happening into the houses along the beach. See that if we try adjusting on the exposure, we want to keep it realistic. This is early evening before it gets into the sun actually setting. If I want any changes or modifications in the texture, we can see how it's going to affect the fence. I'm going to be careful not to overdo or undo the clarity. So again, it's all about experimentation. If I did want to go back over and check out other variations, I could take a look at like future or different styles, how it's going to give us a different tone. Maybe I want to have this vintage look. But this is more just a kind of experimentation, seeing what you like, what works for you, what might look good, what doesn't look good, allowing you to just get familiar with the tools in the program overall. So if I try out just this yellow toned type of image, again, seeing the difference between the two. So it gives me a different look, but still works. It's kind of up to you to decide if you like it or if you don't. If I don't, I can always hit Control or Command Z to undo. I'm kind of just exploring, seeing what happens when I do deal with modifying out the background, creating out a mask if I wanted to apply over top of the sky, but it's not going to have much effect to what I'm necessarily looking for. And if I don't like it, I can always delete out sections, but we can just see how much better the coloring of the image is overall. So once I'm satisfied with it, again, we can right click on the image, export. It's going to rename the file, make sure not to have the same one. And for the last two images, we will take a look at exporting multiple images together. But I can see that this is now into my folder, has my name on the file down in the bottom right. So our final two images that we're taking a look at, one is going to be what is known as our, we'll take a look at the beach. With the beach image, this is a very bright image overall. Yes, I could take a look at the auto contrast, and it does a great job of recognizing the overall details, dropping down the saturate or the exposure, making it darker. And again, seeing the difference between the two, you see how bright that original image was. But there are more enhancements that we really want to consider with this. Maybe it's a matter of not necessarily wanting to have all four people in this image, taking them out completely, or focusing on just taking out a couple of them. What we're going to take a look at is the remove tool. With the remove tool, I'm going to go over top of my two subjects. With the remove tool, I'm going to paint over the two subjects to the right. And I can always shrink down the size of the brush if I want to get little details. But I'm going to leave the two people to the left. Now that I have the two people to the right selected, I can hit remove. And you see that with the variation provided, it just takes those out, recognizing the area around it, replacing in just sand that covers and takes away from those two original people. And I can see the different variations, see which one looks more realistic or looks best for what I'm trying to go for. So very easily we can take away certain aspects and it just creates a different look, or it takes away things that are unnecessary to you in your photos. Looking at the layout right now, a couple issues I do want to deal with. Right now I can see the landscape, or the horizon line is not actually straight. I'm going to go over to the crop tool. With the crop tool, I can go to a corner and go to the sides a little bit outside of the area. I'm going to rotate this so I get a horizontal line for my horizon line. You can see that it's going to crop off some of your image. That's absolutely fine. I have a lot of open space to work with. Once I'm satisfied with it, I can hit enter and it sets it out. But if we take a look at this, if I do want to do any type of enhancements, I can look to push maybe the texture to bring a little bit better texture into the sand, or push the clarity. Just be careful not to overdo it, that the subjects look unrealistic or the water looks unrealistic. You want to, again, keep it as realistic as possible. But one feature that if we take a look at, this sky is a little bit dull overall. The sky right now, yes, is blue. We can make this a little bit more interesting, actually doing what is known as a sky replacement. Thing is that we can't do it just in Lightroom itself. We're actually going to make the modification in Photoshop. Doesn't mean we have to leave this program. What's going to happen is I'm going to right click on the picture. We're going to go edit and edit in Photoshop. And we're going to hit open anyway. With this, it's automatically going to open up Photoshop. If you're unfamiliar with Photoshop, please take a look at my previous videos. But I'm going to shrink this down just so we can fit it into the scene. With Photoshop right now, this is just a very flat, boring blue sky. But what we're going to do is what is known as a sky replacement. To do a sky replacement, I'm going to go up to Edit, down to Sky Replacement. With Sky Replacement, it automatically puts in a blue sky of the default settings, but I can hit the drop down and see different blue skies that I can choose from. For myself, adding in a couple clouds just helps to make it look more realistic, but it's a matter of making sure that it looks realistic to the rest of the colors and tones of the image. So I can kind of sort through or experiment to see what the clouds are going to look like. And we could always import our own external image. Just be careful of making sure, again, it looks realistic to the scene that you are working with. I don't want to try putting on a big colorful sky that doesn't look natural, doesn't look realistic to the image. If I find a sky that looks relatively good to what I'm looking for, I can look to modify out the settings of this sky. For the shift edge, that's not going to do much. But if I adjust on the bottom, you can see that if I bring the shift edge, it's going to try fading out the look and feel. This doesn't look natural for what I'm going for. Going to make sure that the clouds still are visible in the scene. The faded edge, just going to soften up those areas again. just thinking that they are going to fade away from the distance. But what we have to be careful of, or what we're really trying for, is to maintain and get the right brightness and color for the overall sky image. So this brightness does have to go up a little bit higher in comparison to what it originally was. For the scale, I can adjust the clouds or the sky to be bigger or smaller. Again, it does have to extend all the way out to the rest of the image. So this is where it does take a little bit of finagling, but make sure that it does reach out to the edges. You can look to modify the actual landscape in the foreground. We have the foreground adjustments. I don't need these. I want to keep to the look and feel of the rest of the image. But if I do want to change the placement a little bit, I can actually move right over to the image and adjust it. And this helps to make the clouds look a little bit more realistic as they fade away. They're not just cutting into the landscape, disappearing, but we can get a transition where they're further back but not actually ever touching the water. So this definitely helps to bring this image to life. Once I'm satisfied with it, I click OK. And to get this to work in Lightroom, you can currently see the difference between the two images. If I did want to brighten this up again, I could look to help enhance the color. So if I click on the thumbnail for this mask, I can look to push the brightness up a little bit more, so it's a little bit more faded. I can see the difference between the original and the new. Just pulling down to see the scene. If I wanted any more bright, I could definitely push it further. But again, just want to make this look realistic. With clouds in the sky, it is going to be a little bit darker. So I don't want to need to have the brightness up or too high. But once I am satisfied with the overall look, I'm going to hit Control S to save my work, or Command S. It saves it here, and then we'll make the modifications directly to Lightroom. So it's a very quick, easy way to bring your image a little bit more to life. And again, if I hit Y, we can see the difference. But if I wanted to see the original image, I would have to go back into my original folder. We can see the difference between what was the original modification versus the new variation that we have. You see how much better the water stands out. It's not overblown with the white that originally started with the image. And adding in those clouds just brings this a lot more to life. So before we get into exporting this, we are going to make the last modification to our final image. Our final image is going to be this Canyon Cow image. For this is where we get a little bit more experimental. This is not a bad picture overall, but there are a couple flares that we have to deal with. We maybe want to enhance certain areas just to make it stand out. You could always test out the auto settings. I don't like how vibrant it gets or how bright it gets in the overall image. I don't want to go pure black and white because I do want to have the sun color. But what we can do is a less saturated version of this. So first things first, I want to clean up these little flares that are happening on the image. So I'm going to go over to the remove tool. I'm going to enhance the size of my brush and paint over top to get rid of this flare. I'm also going to shrink down the size of my brush to get rid of the flare over on the left side, this long line that's going down. And I can hit remove. You see it does a great job of eliminating out those flares. I can just click out of the settings. Now we go into modifying or editing this image overall. We see that I did a Dutch angle on this photo, just to bring something of some type of different type of shot. Having a straight horizontal line felt that was boring. But with this image overall, I can look to kind of experiment with the contrast or the exposure. Pushing up the contrast. Just want to pull out some colors. But the area that I do want to modify today is adjusting my saturation. And we're going to see how we can enhance certain features while pulling back or desaturating certain features. So if I desaturate this a little bit more, like negative 50%, I could look to bring out certain aspects to make them stand out better. So if I like the flare of the sun happening, where we get the streaks of light, I'm going to go over to my mask, and instead of doing a selection over the sky or the background of a specific area, I'm going to paint over the area that I want. Again, I'm going to go a little bit bigger with the brush and paint over the flares that I see here. With this area selected, it creates out a specific mask. With this mask, I'm going to look to saturate just this part of the image, pulling the yellow of the sun up, but making it look back to what it originally was. I want to be careful not to modify the exposure. I'm just looking to help bring that yellow back into the overall image. We're going to create a couple masks for this. I'm going to go up to the top right side where we have create new mask. With this, I'm going to look to select out, again with the brush tool, I'm going to look to draw over the metallics of the car. So I can shrink down the size of my brush. I'm going to paint over top of the chrome that we see over top of the car. If you need to zoom in, you can always hit Control plus sign. Or shrink down your brush if necessary for certain aspects. If I ever need to touch up a certain area, remember you can always hold down Alt or Option to paint over areas that you don't want selected. So just with these areas selected out, and I can always zoom in if I need to make sure I have these areas selected. It's just meant to help enhance the overall chrome look. So if I want to push this up, we can modify the contrast. See, if I drop down the contrast, we get a little bit brighter. Or if I push up the exposure, we get a lot brighter. but we still want to maintain realism in the layout. So just be careful of the areas that you go over. If I want to saturate these more, bring in a little bit more blue tone on it, it affects those. But if I do want to paint in certain areas or subtract from certain areas, I can still hold down Alt and easily erase out areas that I'm seeing that are covering up certain features. But if I, again, see the difference between the before and after, it's minimal, but it's something that will allow me to kind of see my preference or how I would edit the photo. The one element that I want to take a look at is maybe making this cowl canyon stand out a little bit better. So I'm going to create a new mask. I'm going to paint over top of this. Again, I can always hold down Alt to paint over areas that I don't want to be modified. But with this area painted in, I can modify the exposure, make it a little bit more vivid on the name, so the name stands out, like it's picking up the highlight of the image. And again, I can always clean up the areas or hold down Alt to do any certain areas that I don't want. But this allows me to kind of build out something that would work for me. So you can easily jump into different masks, what you're trying to modify. Maybe I want to bring back a little bit of color into certain features. But you can get very selective in certain areas of how you want to paint something in, or how you want to modify certain areas. I'll do one last mask. Select the mask. And I'm going to brush in this foreground just to bring out some texture on the foreground area. Maybe brighten it up a little bit, but without taking too much away from the rest of the image. So if I go over to my texture, we can enhance the overall little effects or grains, as well as maybe modifying out the clarity. You can see how we can bring out a little highlight over top of the image. Helps to draw the viewer's attention to the front little details before it draws to the rest of the image. So again, if I'm seeing the difference between the original versus the new, the signage, cow cannon trading post, name stands out a lot better. The chrome just gives a little bit of better separation from what's going on. If I want to look at any other modifications, bring back any color, You can see how it's going to change out the overall look and feel. But to each their own, how it's going to get affected, how you're going to change your design. Just a matter of how we can get into customizing something unique, modifying your photos to be more uniquely yours. So if I wanted to export both this image and my picture of our beach, what I'm going to look to do is select out both the images down on the bottom left side. I can hold down Command or Control, so it selects out both images. With both images selected, I'm going to right click, go down to Export. Here, I'm just going to get rid of the number, and it's automatically going to place in its own specific numbers. But I'm still saving it to the same spot. We still have our watermark that's going to be applied onto it. And when I hit Export, it automatically does its job and go into that folder. There's the now modified Cal Canon trading post with the name on the bottom. We have our name displayed for our sunset. And we have our 6 images that you've now completed and edited. I hope this is helpful, beneficial for you learning Lightroom. I know it's a long video, but I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to stop, pause, and do whatever you need to help you become better with your photography. Like and subscribe. I'll see you soon.